Okay, I'm glad everyone can hear me. So hello everyone, welcome to my talk. My name is Kasia Rachuta, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to network if you're scared of people. Uh-oh. Something's happened here. Okay, now it works. So I'm going to start off with telling you a little bit about my background. So I graduated almost 3 years ago. I have a master's in theoretical physics from University College London. Shortly after I graduated, I moved to San Francisco for an internship, and I've lived there ever since. I currently work as a data scientist at Medium, which is a blogging and publishing platform. I'm also a PyLadies organizer for the San Francisco chapter. So for those of you who don't know, PyLadies is a group for mentoring and supporting women who code in Python, not for women who bake pies, although those two are not mutually exclusive. And finally, I'm also a Delta Analytics Fellow as of January this year, where I work with several fellow analysts and scientists, and I help one charity in California to figure out their data needs for 6 months. So why am I giving this talk? So as I mentioned, I moved to San Francisco 3 years ago. I didn't know anyone besides the CEO of the company I was working for. I got that internship through networking, and ever since, I've networked my way around the Bay Area. Anything like apps, networking events, even 5 times a week, which is why I'm giving this talk, and I'm going to tell you about my experiences and what I've learned. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the importance of networking. So we often tell ourselves we should network, but really, why? Why do we care about that? And it's easy to come up with excuses to not put yourself in like a potentially awkward or an uncomfortable situation, and that's what networking often seems to be like. So now I'm going to try to convince you why you should do that and what benefits it will have to your career. So, first of all, job and professional opportunities. So I've looked at some statistics, and there's anything like 80% of jobs are found through networking. That's a huge percentage, and without networking, you're narrowing yourself down to the remaining 20%. That means that you may be missing out on some great opportunities, on ways to switch your career, on ways to progress. There is also another statistic that says that something like 70% of different opportunities are not even formally advertised. So by knowing someone who may be recruiting, you are saving yourself some time. You're learning about the opportunities that are not advertised, that may be really great for your career, that may be very interesting. But also, networking is a two-way street, and I will keep on reminding you about that. That means that if you are recruiting in the future, and you know some people that may be interested in certain opportunities, you may reach out to them earlier. Recruiting is a painful, costly, long-time process. So if you know someone ahead of time that may be interested in a certain opportunity, you can contact them, and maybe you will employ them, which is great. Your company will love you. You may get a referral bonus. There are lots of advantages of that. So one particular opportunity that this may be useful for if you're trying to move abroad. So for example, I was trying to move from London to San Francisco, or really wherever. But that often can be achieved if you know someone in that place. The reason is that companies often think that they will have to relocate you, which is very expensive. And as someone who's relatively early in my career, that was really hard. And even when I was applying for jobs last summer in the US, I was based on the West Coast, and some of the companies I would apply for were on the East Coast, and not knowing people made it a lot more difficult to even get into the interview process. So, the next reason, mentoring and mentorship. So I'm going to briefly touch on some advantages of mentorship. So that's improved performance at work, promotions, new opportunities, new directions. Your mentors can introduce you to new people. They can help you advance your career. You can also find mentees. So as I said, networking is a two-way street. So you can find mentees, and that has a feel-good factor of helping other people, which helps your self-worth. It also helps you improve your relationship building skills, your listening skills, and often helping others, especially those who are a minority in a field like tech can be viewed very positively in your company or anywhere else where there are like diversity and inclusion efforts. Another one is new friends. You can simply make new friends. It's not all about making professional contacts. And, you know, moving to San Francisco, I met a lot of people who are transplants, whether it's from other places in the US or whether it's from all over the world. And often you meet people that, you know, are doing very different things to you, but they may want to just hang out, which is also great. Another one, knowledge. So by networking, you can learn about new technologies that companies are using. You may be considering introducing a new tool in your company, which may be costly or time-consuming to introduce, and you may need to make a case about it. Or you may want to figure out if that's something that's right for you. So you can do that through meeting people at other companies that are doing the same thing. Most recently, I met someone from one of the other companies in the Bay Area, and I organized a knowledge exchange lunch with my team and their team. So we went to their office for lunch, and we just chatted for an hour about the way they run their experiments and the way we run our experiments, and you know what problems we have with our data and what are some of the pain points for us, which is great because we both learned. It also made me look good in front of my boss, and now they're gonna come to our office. And finally, figuring out your next direction. So say you're an engineer and you want to move into product management. How do you learn about product management? Well, you can go and talk to a PM at your company. But chances are that your job is not going to work in the same way at every company. So it's worth learning more about how it really does work at other places, what sort of challenges people face, and whether it's really the right path for you. So as I mentioned, last summer I was job hunting, and I was very set into going into fintech. I thought this is this new direction I want to pursue, and I was very convinced, and I was applying for a lot of jobs. But actually I ended up talking to a lot of data scientists from fintech companies, and I realized that writing fraud detection models is not something I want to do right now. So I hope that I convinced you that it's worthwhile to network. Now I'm going to cover some ways to network. So this is the sort of thing we usually think when we talk about networking. There's like this big event, there are lots of people, most people hold a wine glass, and I'm not going to lie, that helps to meet people, but I'm not going to advocate for that courage. But it's often difficult to break in. How do you talk to people, and is it really the only way of meeting people? So to start off with, I want to distinguish between two different types of events. There are events that are purely networking events, and I'm actually not a big fan of them. Most often than not, they are full of either salespeople, recruiters, and people job hunting. But if you want to make some meaningful connections with people that have something in common with, I would advocate for going to meetups. So go on meetup.com, put in your area of interest in the search box. So for me, that was women in tech, data science, Python, SQL. And then on the page, I joined almost every single meetup group that I thought was relevant. Then I started weeding out some that haven't organized a meetup since 2013. Chances are they're not going to organize anything interesting this year. But go to talks that are interesting for you. The reason for that is that even if you don't meet people, you will still learn something. But that gives you a good starting point for a discussion or conversation with someone. So you can talk to them about how great or not great the speaker was, what was the content, have you learned anything, why did you attend that meetup? Is it because you're trying to learn more about, say, data visualization? Is it because you're bad at it? Is it because you're very, very passionate about it? It gives you a lot of starting points for a conversation with someone. The other thing I would say is actually set up goals. And I know that sounds very transactional, but before you go into an event, think, why are you trying to meet people? Are you recruiting? Are you just trying to learn more about other companies? You don't necessarily need to have a reason to want to meet others, but it's something worth thinking about, especially if you don't want to feel disappointed at the end. So think about why you're trying to meet people, what sort of relationships you are trying to make, and maybe how many contacts you would like to make. And that was one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given about networking. So to set up a goal. So usually for me, it's 3. Because one, it's kind of a very lazy target. It's very easy to hit. If you say 10, that's either unrealistic, or you end up making very, very surface level connections with people that probably won't last. Chances are you won't remember all those 10 people. Chances are you're not going to remember much about them. It's all going to be very surface level, small talk kind of thing. The reason why I like 3 is that often once I've spoken to 3 people, I feel a little bit warmed up and I feel ready to talk to more people. I don't always do that, but it often happens that I say I'm going to meet 3 people and I end up meeting 5. So that's one thing. The other thing is I personally try to see if there is anyone in the big room that doesn't have anyone to talk to and go and talk to them. And often then you are joined by other people. Joining groups may be tricky. Sometimes people are in the middle of a conversation, and I think it's up to them to make you feel welcome. As I said, it's a two-way street. If you just kind of hang awkwardly there and you don't really have anything to talk about and they're not really welcoming you into the conversation, cut your losses, move on. It's okay to say to someone, you know, it was great to meet you, bye, or even quietly sneak out. The other thing is ask questions. People love talking about themselves, but that comes with a caveat of do not be creepy. Do not try to interrogate them. So there is a fine balance of trying to learn more about someone and, you know, not seeming like you work for the FBI. Okay, the next thing, social media. So social media, we've got plenty of them, can be used for networking as well. For example, I have a friend who's very good at Twitter, and she would tweet at people and she would get responses, and sometimes she would get to go to coffee with those people and actually meet them in real life, which is great. So if there is anyone you're interested in and you follow, you think post interesting things, feel free to reach out. I often use Facebook. So Facebook isn't really a great tool for professional connections, but I'm also a member of a number of groups for, say, women in tech, girls in tech, Pi ladies on Facebook. And often people post something interesting. Sometimes it turns out that they work for a company I'm interested in, I would love to learn more about. So reach out to them. I often send them a comment under anything they post saying that I've messaged them, because otherwise it goes to the other inbox that nobody really checks. So that's another way of meeting people. I found that in San Francisco, often people post on those pages saying, hey, I just moved here. I don't know anyone. Does anyone want to hang out? I usually say, yes, I can hang out with you. So that's another way. Feel free to do it the other way if you feel that's appropriate. LinkedIn. So the way I've used LinkedIn was mainly when I was job hunting. So say I see a job opening, I don't know anyone at that company, and I go onto LinkedIn and I search for that company, and then you can see if you know anyone there or if you have anyone in common. So you can ask someone that you have in common as a connection to introduce you. That's something that I would caution you to be careful with. The reason for that is that you don't want the other person to feel like you're constantly asking them for introductions and you're not really giving them anything in return. So sometimes maybe if there is someone that knows a lot of people and they've introduced you to a couple, maybe try to pause that, maybe try to meet people in a different way, because you really don't want to make people feel like you're using them. And finally, Slack. So a lot of community groups have their own Slack accounts. Pi Ladies being one example. Another one I'm a part of is Women in Machine Learning and Data Science. So some of those Slack accounts have a channel that says introductions. So you can go in, you can introduce yourself. You can see who else has introduced themselves and maybe reach out to them. People often post job openings, events, things like that. So there are many ways that you can, message people on Slack and talk to them, but there are also ways that you can learn about other opportunities through that. One thing I'm going to add on the subject of asking for introductions, I once met someone through an app that I'm going to mention in a minute, and she asked me, she was an account manager and she was interested in design, and she asked me for introductions to designers, and it so happens that I have quite a few friends that work in design. And what ended up happening, I introduced her to 2 people, and she kept on messing them around, and she kept on switching the dates and being like, oh, I'm busy, can we reschedule, can we reschedule, can we reschedule? And she expected them to be extremely flexible with their schedules. That's made an incredibly bad impression, and I will never introduce her to anyone ever again. It made me look bad in front of my friends, and that's something that you want to avoid doing. So now, moving on to the next thing, that's apps and websites. So there are specific apps and websites designed for meeting new people, and I don't mean Tinder, I mean things like Tinder for networking. So in San Francisco, I've personally used The Guild. That's a very Bay Area specific website for women that you fill out your profile, you say who you're interested in, what sort of things you're interested in meeting, whether it's like mentors, business partners, whether you're recruiting, anything like that, and then they will match you with people with similar interests. So I actually met some really interesting people from some cool companies. I've met one girl that introduced me to some other people when I was job hunting, so that has worked great. There are a number of other apps that I found, like Shopper, Meet Me, Happening. I actually did a quick Google search before that, and I Googled networking apps, professional networking apps in Europe, and it came up with at least 10 different results. So that's something that may be worth trying, if that's something you feel comfortable with. And then volunteering. So volunteering and community involvement may not necessarily seem like an obvious way to network, but it's actually very easy to network through that without thinking about it as networking. So, for example, as a Pi Ladies organizer, I've met a number of other women and men who are software engineers and work in Python, who are data scientists, data analysts, who are looking for jobs, who are involved in a lot of cool things. I've learned through them about a lot of really cool opportunities. Another example of volunteering involves open source projects, any sort of things like that that may actually lead to professional opportunities. One of the things I was involved with for a while last year was Data for Democracy. So that was something that sprang up in the US after the last presidential election, where people would look at all sorts of political data and analyze it in different ways. So for example, there was a project on refugees. So if there are things like that that interest you, that's a really great way of meeting new people. That community has grown to over 2,000 members by now. One of my friends that I know through that actually got a job without that much of a formal interviewing process, because people who were giving him that job already knew his skills, already had worked with him, already knew that he was a sane person to work with, but also had a lot of technical skills to offer. And last one, speaking. So being a speaker, speaking on panels, conferences, and whatnot, makes it a lot easier to talk to people, because people come up to you afterwards and they ask you questions. So that way you don't really need to make that much of an effort to talk to other people, which is great. But also, I was on a panel a few months ago, and I ended up connecting with one of the fellow panelists afterwards, and we ended up organizing the lunches for our teams together. So that's also another great way of connecting with other speakers that may be doing some cool things. One of the other things you could do beforehand, whether it's before an event, whether you want to talk to a speaker or to another person that's also attending, is to research them beforehand. And by research, I mean check what company they're doing, what have they gotten up in their professional life. Do not ask them how was their holiday in Dubai in 2011. If you know that about them, you've gone too far. Okay, so my last point is going to be about maintaining a network. So when we think about networking, we just think about getting out there, meeting new people, making new connections. But I think it's equally important to maintain that network and to nurture the contacts you've made already. Why is that important? So for example, say you meet someone today, and they work for this really cool, I don't know, self-driving cars company. And in 2 years' time, you're looking for a role in that space, and you reach out to them. Do you think they are likely to respond to you? I would say there is a 90% chance that they will ignore you. They won't remember who you are and why the hell they should help you and why the hell they should give you like that job referral or meet you for a coffee or anything like that. They probably will just say no. Another example from my life includes the fact that I met someone almost 3 years ago, and very recently he reached out saying that he's raising around the funding for his company, and am I interested in investing? No, I was not. I have no idea what he's been up to since, and it just felt very transactional that, you know, now that he needed something from me, he's reached out. So, the first thing, follow up. And by follow up, I mean send an email, send a LinkedIn connection. Do not ask them if they want to meet you for a drink at 10 p.m. That same night. That's creepy, and if you're at a conference, that's a potential violation of code of conduct. And that's the sort of situation that actually has happened to me. So, you can email or you can send a LinkedIn connection. When you are sending a LinkedIn invitation, I would strongly advise you to customize it. It's really not that hard to write a short message saying, "It was great to meet you. I hope you will connect." Anything like that takes a minute too, maybe 5 at the most, but if you're getting to the 5-minute mark, you're probably overthinking it. You can tell them if you've enjoyed meeting them, what you've remembered about them. You don't have to. But it's really nice to personalize those invites. And I often get invitations from people, and I see that we have, say, 15 connections in common, and they send me the bog standard text, and I just think, I don't know if I've met you, or do I not remember? Do I want to connect with you? I think that's a really nice way of adding like this personal touch. Here are some examples of emails. So follow up. If you want to meet up with someone for coffee or expand on the conversation you've had, go for it. I think that's really important, and that's one of my preferred ways of connecting with people. For the past, I don't know, year or so, I meet someone, we have a bit of a conversation, we realize we're working on similar problems, or we're doing similar things, or we're interested in the same thing, like travel or scuba diving or anything like that. So just simply follow up and invite them out and ask if they want to grab a coffee, or if they want to come and have lunch with me at my company, or anything like that. One other thing, okay, so here's another example of a text when you are not following up to ask them for a coffee. It's nice to just follow up and say, "Thank you, great to meet you, hope I will meet you at another event." That's okay too, and that also adds a nice personal touch to your message. And people appreciate these messages. Again, if you are trying to meet up with someone, it's okay to follow up. It's okay to, if you send one email and they don't respond, it's okay to follow up after that. Give them maybe a week. People are busy, stuff happens, and sometimes emails get buried into their inboxes. But again, following up is a balance of, you know, not being too persistent and annoying, and you know, trying to show some perseverance and the fact that people have lives. So I would say don't follow up more than 3 times, and give them at least maybe a week between each message. So another example from my life is that I'm trying to grab a coffee with someone I met in February. We've both been either away or busy, and that's going to happen in a couple of weeks' time, but I've had to follow up multiple times. And again, as I mentioned, networking is a two-way street. So sometimes I have people reaching out to me, especially students, people who are graduating soon, trying to break into the data science field. And they ask me if I want to set up a Skype call, if I want to chat to them, go for coffee, all these things. I say yes, I'm very open to talk to people. But if I tell them, hey, can you follow up in 2 weeks because I'm busy right now, I kind of expect them to follow up. And when they do, I'm usually making an effort to do that. But often, I'm very busy. The emails get buried into a bunch of other things. And if you don't follow up, I'm probably not going to reach out to you to set that up again. So follow up, and then follow up again. So as I mentioned, invite people out to coffee. So one of my favorite ways of networking with people is going for morning coffee. So before work, usually 8:30 a.m. Could be later depending on your schedule. I'm usually a morning person, so I like those kind of times, schedule half an hour and stick to it, unless the conversation is going great. But usually, sticking to the time shows your respect for the other person's time, and I think that's very important. Or if you set up a Skype call with someone. So recently, I was talking to one of the students that reached out to me and asked for a call. And she asked for 20 minutes. And at the 20-minute mark, she said to me, you know what, I know that it's a 20-minute. I have another question. Like, we can skip it if you're busy. Or, you know, if you're OK, I'd like to ask that. And that's a really nice way of showing that you value people's time. So you should be respectful of that. And another thing is lunches. So lunches are usually for people that I know a little bit better. That's just my personal preference. But what I've been doing is that I started a new job 7 months ago. And, you know, I updated my LinkedIn so everyone could see. And a lot of people reached out to me with congratulations. A lot of people reached out to me asking if I wanted to catch up. And a lot of people from my companies have ever since visited to talk to me. And that's a very nice way of keeping in touch with people, you know, especially if you know them a little bit better. And I feel like finding a new job or, you know, becoming on the board of something or volunteering for a new thing or any sort of social media updates are a nice way of seeing, you know, it reminds you that there is someone out there you've met before. And it's also nice at that point to reach out to them and congratulate them and be like, oh, actually, I haven't seen you in like a year or 6 months or whatever. Do you want to grab lunch or coffee? Or anything like that. And then equally, post on social media. Don't spam and flood people with your updates, but it's nice to post every now and then to show what you've been up to, whether it's a talk you're giving, a paper you've written, any sort of milestones in your professional life, any sort of opportunities you may know about. That way, people will also feel a lot more comfortable reaching out to you. So that was the social media part I've mentioned. So if you're connected with people on Facebook, obviously be more careful about what you post. But I don't think I need to mention to anyone to be sensible with your social media. I do use Facebook for a lot of professional things. A lot of PyLadies things are organized. I post on Facebook, which reminds people that I'm there and, you know, I'm doing things. And sometimes people would reach out. I make sure that, you know, I obviously don't post any sort of pictures that may be too personal, that my profile only has a certain visibility settings. You know, you can divide people you know in your network into friends and acquaintances, and I often choose what I post is shown to what people. So that's something to be aware of. And then finally, not all of the connections, you won't be able to maintain all of your connections. And that's okay. If you've messaged someone a number of times, if someone's trying to set up a lunch with you and they are not showing up, or they are running late, or they are constantly rescheduling, it may be time to let that connection go. And that's okay. I think it's really important to distinguish when it's really worthwhile to follow up, to keep on pestering someone, to keep on asking them. But equally, I think it's very important to have some sense of like, oh my gosh, like you don't want to be the person when they turn around and they're like, oh my God, this person is messaging me again. I just like really don't want to see them. Not all connections can be maintained, and also that's a lot harder if you move cities or countries, which is what happened to me. And that's okay, and I think it's important to have that balance of meeting new people, maintaining old connections, and moving on. So, thank you. That's everything from me. This has my Twitter handle and my email if you'd like to reach out. And if you have any questions, feel free to put your hand out. Cool, then thank you.